Oh, good evening. 6 o'clock rolled up right away. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the October 11th regular board meeting. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. We can stand, please. Thank you. We will jump right into business. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do we have any modification for the board? Are there any modifications the board would like to make to the consent agenda? Okay, then with that, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from the September 27th regular meeting, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, contracts, policy second read, and field trips. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Julie.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you for the second, Catherine. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Oh. Okay.
And to take this policy second read out of the consent agenda and have it be its own separate action after citizen comment, is that?
That is correct. I'm sorry. Okay, so
Sorry, I didn't catch that in time.
that's okay. Do I need to modify the
Somebody needs to modify their motion.
motion?
Consent agenda minus that one.
It's not. I just said
She
it.
said it verbally. And you said so moved. So.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented, excluding any policy second reads.
No, then second that motion.
Okay, so we have an amended motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So next on the agenda, we have citizens' comments. This is a portion of the meeting where the community, if community would like to provide some comments or present anything to the board, this is the time. Do we have any, Kim? Perfect. Okay, perfect. Next up is special presentations. We have our ASB and student leadership reports, and I believe we have a couple of representatives here. So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to start with Westside High School.
Okay. Hello, my name is Soraya. I'm the president of the Leadership Club at Westside High School, and I'm here to tell you about what's been happening. First off, we have a full enrollment at Westside, close to 300 students. We currently have a waiting list for all of our programs. Our project Mondays are in full swing. Students all take one project, and they range from rock climbing, t-shirt design and printing, building trench bolts, career explorations, and more. Our WSU No Child Left Inside Echo Stewardship is up and running and is completely full. They're already heading out on their second field trip this week. Leadership Club renewed our Bombas Socks partnership. They increased our donation to 5,000 pairs. We created a form for individuals, nonprofits, local service organizations, and schools to fill out to partner with us. So far, we already have 15 requests. Our Fall Spirit Week is coming up on October 24th, and our Spirit Days are Adam Sandler Day, Jersey Day, Color War Day, Anything But a Backpack Day, and Halloween/Dress Up Day. We had a Westside Sunrise on September 30th, where we had roughly 30 students come eat donuts, watch the sunrise together, and it was pretty awesome. Soon our Leadership Club and other students will be writing veterans letters to veterans in and outside of our community, which we do annually. And finally, yesterday, our Leadership Club handed out green ribbons in support of World Mental Health Day. I want to thank the school board for supporting Westside students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh, any
Soraya.
questions? Okay, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
All right. Good evening. My name is Courtney Dodge. I'm the Wenatchee High School ASB president. And so I'm just here to give an overview of what our ASB has been doing. So I just want to go over our exec team this year because I know it was probably mentioned in the spring, but I want to just refresh your minds. So I'm president. Then we have our vice president is Anastasia Durecki. She's a 12th grader. Then we have our treasurer, which is Manuel Valencia. He's a 12th grader. And then we have a secretary, Janessa Hepton, which is an 11th grader. And then we had some changes to our leadership within ASB. So due to some scheduling conflicts with the school, our diversity coordinator had to resign and a new one was appointed. And then our freshman senate president was appointed at the beginning of the year. And then over the summer, our coordinators went to leadership camp at the CISPIS Learning Center. And this allowed us to develop and learn about leadership skills, collaborate with leaders from other schools, and become more prepared for the school year. And then this year we brought back the homeroom reps, but we rebranded as the Student Representative Council because we don't have homerooms anymore. So that was led and created by our vice president. And so we had our first meeting on the 28th of September and attendance and participation was very high. We received lots of feedback on events and the school culture as a whole. And the next meeting will be on the 27th of October. And then right now we're in the midst of our homecoming week and currently we're kind of having to adjust due to the smoke. So our girls flag football game was pushed back to the Friday following the dance. And then the football game activities may be moved to a later date if the smoke persists. And then the dance was moved from the Apple Bowl to inside the main gym because of the air quality. And so every week our ASB has been putting on a lunch activity. It's usually on Fridays, but sometimes it's in the middle of the week to help connect our student body. So each Senate has created a game for people to participate and our culture group had a get to know your peers meet and greet type of thing. And then we had a PEP assembly, which was our first in-person assembly since COVID at the beginning of the year. And then last Friday, we had a homecoming assembly in our main gym, which was also in person. And then inspired by feedback given to us by the Student Representative Council, we created a continual feedback form for our ASB that was posted all around the school. And then our clubs coordinator is currently trying to compile a complete list of all the many clubs in our high school. And it's almost finished with the project. And then there have been 2 club fairs so far, one on the freshman Ignite Day, and the other one was in the first week of school. So that's all that I have for you today. Is there any questions? No? All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Great. So the next thing on the agenda is our school improvement plans. So Bill, your turn.
Excellent. I am going to first say thank you to our student leadership. It's always great to hear from the students. I appreciate you guys being here tonight and sharing. Hope that the smoke clears and you guys are both able to enjoy a great homecoming weeks at Wenatchee High School on West Side. And I will introduce Dr. Corey Callahar, who's going to provide some updates on our school improvement planning process.
Thank you, Superintendent Eagle. Appreciate that. And thank you, ASB. I got to thank Soraya on her way out. And good evening, school board. Thanks for having me tonight. I originally was just going to share some information with you, and then I thought better of it. And so you have the same documentation that our building leaders received this summer at our administrative advance to kind of walk us through the school improvement plan process. And it's not very much different than it has been in the past, but we wanted you to get a flavor and a feel for what we were asking our building leaders to do. And the goal with our school improvement plan is that there's a through line from our strategic plan to the building plan to our student growth goals that the teachers have to create in the classroom. We want there to be a direct line that you can see through that. So we want that to be shown through to the school board when you receive these school improvement plans in November. So the school improvement plan is really just a guiding document for the building. And I don't mean to offset it by just a guiding document. It's a big document that really guides and is the vision for the school, directly related to the strategic plan, and then concurrently also reflects the student growth goals that happen in the classroom. And so we have one of the things that is new this year is the template that we decided to go with. In the past, we have had kind of a generic school improvement plan template that we have used, and then some schools that are in school improvement, or if they are related to some of the title funding, or if they have LAP high poverty dollars, they used a different form. And so instead of doing that, we just had every one of our buildings use the state's consolidated school improvement plan template. And so that's what everyone is using. So you'll see that in November when it happens. There will be a little bit of a difference because some of the buildings that have categorical funding in their building, the title, the LAP high poverty, or the school improvement, their document will have some of last year's planning as well. So it's kind of like a cycle. You'll see some of the results from last year, and then they'll have this year's plan, and then it'll cycle around again. The buildings that don't have those categorical funds or school improvement will just have one, just kind of this year's plan. So it'll look a little bit different, but it'll have the same flavor and the same template. So we're excited about that. Each of the school improvement plans will have SMARTY goals. And so if you've probably heard of SMART goals, and maybe you've heard of SMARTY goals, but we keep adding cool things to make them more robust. So the SMARTY goals are strategic, measurable, ambitious, but attainable, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable goals. And each of the plans will have a goal that's related to English language arts, math, social emotional learning, and then the PLC at work in each of the buildings. And that is for some of the plans, the ones that are related to the categorical funds, that's an additional goal. They usually have 3 goals. And so we have an additional one that our buildings are using with regard to the work of the PLC. And so since, well, the pandemic put school improvement plans, they're still happening, but we didn't really accentuate or highlight them quite as much because we were kind of dealing with life as it was happening at the time. And so some of our schools are not on the schedule that they would like to be on. So the schedule we really would like folks to be on is have a draft of your plan before leaving for summer. And then when you come back and school starts, you already have some of the components ready to go, and we can get your learning improvement team started, and you can get those goals kind of hammered out quickly. Some of our buildings are having to start from the beginning this year, where they may not have left for the summer with school improvement plan already in process or in draft form. So our goal is that this document will take us through the entire year, the entire cycle. And so right now, during the fall, our school leaders are working with their learning improvement teams and their constituents to build those plans. And they will be turned in October 31st, and then they'll be packaged and in a consent agenda for you to all look at and review. And then that's the board approval piece. And then on the backside, these are some of the checks and balances that we'll have throughout the school year. Our learning improvement team will be checking in at each building throughout the year. And during that visit, we'll have classroom visits, and we'll also be checking in with the building leader on how their school improvement process went and is going, and how their goals are coming to fruition. We'll also have a mid-year reflection, and all of the building principals are evaluated by Mike Lane and myself. And so during our one-on-ones through this school year, we will be checking in with them periodically to see how they're doing and help them with their goals. Some of those school improvement plans are coming in right now. And so we have a chance to give some feedback on those and get them back to the principals. And then there will be an adjustment. Will probably be adjustment time throughout the entire process as the schools build their plans. But that adjustment time will be really specific for Mike and I to work with the buildings to make sure they're reaching their goals, and they have goals that are actually SMARTY and attainable and strategic in that nature. And then the cycle will come to a close. And that close will be when the building gets their data and they're able to reflect on the goals and the evidence and the documentation that they have. And then they can start reflecting on next year's goals and building their other draft. And then before they leave for summer, we would have them have a rough draft of the next year's plan. So it's a continuous cycle. We're kind of having a restart this year in some of that processing so that we can make sure that we've planned out accordingly, and each building will have what they need to be successful in their school improvement plans. And that is a quick overview of the process. Any questions that the board might have?
School improvement plans, for me, it's something that I haven't heard about in a while. Back when I knew about them, they were tied to OSPI putting us on school improvement based on not meeting, our students not meeting
Yes.
standards. Are these still tied to?
Some schools are. Yeah,
Okay.
we have 3 buildings in the district that are on what we call school improvement. And we used to refer to these plans as a CIPP. So it's a continuous improvement planning process. We've now kind of gone with what the state uses as an SIP. So we're just massaging the acronyms, which we love to do in education. So now we're using the school improvement plan as the acronym that we're using moving forward. So that also might be something you recognize, the SIP plan with the C and the double P. But yeah, some of these are tied to school improvement plans. And then, like I said, others are mandatory for title funding and for LAP high poverty dollars. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Following up on that a little bit, I'm wondering if that could create some confusion. Where folks might think that all of our schools are on improvement plans with the state, which we certainly do not want to give the impression that that is the case.
Absolutely. And I think you're very right. That actually could create some confusion. What we aspire to is that each school has a school improvement plan so they can better from wherever they are. The idea that we can all leverage learning and become the best versions of ourselves. So
Absolutely, I'm all for that. I think it might be important to have the distinction for the public.
yeah, that would be great.
Just my
Yeah.
thought.
Are we still required to send out a letter to the parents of the children attending that school saying, hey, your school has been identified as this,
We have that requirement for title schools, but not necessarily for schools that are on improvement plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so our title schools still get that information to their parents. In fact, I believe they have to hold a meeting and they actually have to have a letter that goes home and then have parents sign off that they are aware of that. But not so much on the school improvement plan that I'm aware of. Or the school improvement process. Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
I do like that every school, we have always done that, where
Yes.
we've had SIP plans. So we have always had schools on improvement. Evaluating what went right, what went wrong.
Yep.
What are we gonna do about it? And that's all really great. So I do commend everybody for continuing along that track. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. Other questions?
Anything? Great.
Awesome.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Great. Okay, that's finally the agenda. Great. So now we are down to action items. The first action item on the agenda is policy second read. Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum has been reviewed, discussed, and edits have been made based on suggestions. Is there a motion to approve policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum?
Motion to approve policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum.
Second.
Any discussion? Perfect. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, hi, Martin.
Okay, you heard me this time. Good.
Yes. Motion carries. The next action item on the agenda is the superintendent search firm consultant selection. Dr. Michelle Price, Laura, and I met on Thursday, October 6th to interview the firm selected during the September 27th meeting, which was McPherson, Jacobson, and Northwest Leadership Associates. As mentioned during that board meeting, both firms are considered well-credentialed and qualified, and they both confirmed the ability to perform all of the scope of work. I will now pass it on to Laura to speak a little bit about the interview process and present the recommendation.
Well, I was basically going to say what Maria just said. So there we are. The 3 of us interviewed those 2 firms. We had 2 representatives from each firm. From McPherson and Jacobson, we had Stephen Lauder and Gustavo Balderas. And they are based out of Omaha, Nebraska. And for Northwest Leadership, we had Bill Jordan and Sergio Hernandez, and those are, that firm is based out of Liberty Lake, Washington. As Maria said, both of those firms are certainly highly qualified, and each of them could easily do the work for us. So it was really a decision that was made on, sort of minute impressions of the differences between the two firms, because they were both highly capable. Both firms presented a bilingual, bicultural element on their team, and we really appreciated that. So we could have easily chosen either one and been perfectly happy, but in the end, we needed to make a choice. And so the three of us confirmed, and we have decided to recommend McPherson and Jacobson to the board tonight for your approval.
Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about the questions that you asked them and how you came to that conclusion? Just a little, I know that there were quite, just from it, I have questions from 2017, I think.
Okay.
And then the additional questions, I only gave one.
Okay,
But-
so we had a total of 13 questions, the last one being asking if they had any questions of us. The opportunity was presented to all board members to give us feedback and formulate questions. I know that we received information from Martin and from you. I'm not sure if anybody else. I looked over the questions beforehand and I was satisfied, especially with the input from the two of you, that the questions covered all the ground that we needed to cover. We talked to them about, we asked them to give their best pitch on why they were the firm for us. So each had the opportunity to do that. We asked them to talk about their most recent experiences. We asked them to identify like school districts with whom they had placed a superintendent. And then we talked about the transparency and active engagement of the community and how we were going to make sure that input from the committee was truly heard and validated. We talked about the demographics of our district and how they felt that they could best represent the community and our makeup. And I did actually have input, but that was early on in the process, making certain that we had that raw data, because I want to know, if people are told that the board is going to see information, I want to make sure that the board is actually seeing the information, and we were assured that that would be happening. Talked about the role of the board in the process. Let's see, selected to work, and talk about each of the individuals who were chosen to work on the team with us, their philosophy on recruiting administrators, as in, do they have somebody in their pocket already that they're going to just shove at us? And, that was not the case. Talked about communication and how those communication lines are going to be open with all board members throughout. And there will be a process identified. And then lastly, they asked questions of us. So it was a pretty, I thought, thorough inquiry. The questions were good. They were answered very completely by both parties, and really, honestly, could have gone either way. Just a slight advantage for McPherson and Jacobson. I don't even know if I could really put my finger on why, but
As the only person who's had experience with the previous, as the only person on the board now who has experience with searching for a superintendent prior, how would you compare what you're seeing in what these firms have shown, or the firm that we've selected compared to how it was in the previous superintendent search? Can you speak to those a little bit?
I think the processes are not so much different. I mean, once we get past the selection, the process of searching for and finding a superintendent are not so much different than they were the last time, but there is more collective wisdom on the board. Just because as a community, we've observed it all just recently, so it felt like the questions were more direct about what our expectations are. And also that diversity component, making sure that we truly do have qualified team member on the search firm that can go out. They both start with an evaluation of community needs. So they're out interviewing folks in the community. The board is going to identify people in the community that we want to make sure that they speak with. And this time with both firms coming forward with a bilingual, bicultural team member was distinctly different than the last time. Last time, the firms alluded to how they were going to handle it, but I don't recollect that they actually brought somebody forward with those assets.
Did you get the sense that there would be any economies of scale by going with the other entity, the Northwest? I forget their full title, but because they were the ones that did the Eastmont search, and so they may know some of the community or have a little bit of a leg up in some aspects like that.
Probably not. And the reason that I think that is because these folks are advertising in the same publications. They're, putting the word out in the same organizations, and people who are looking are going to be looking at those. It's not going to matter to them which search firm really is putting forward the word.
And I think what I meant was more to the extent the community engagement is going to be a critical piece of this. I assume that Northwest Group is a little bit familiar now with our community, or although they may have entirely different consultants doing the work than did work for Eastmont. So I just didn't know if there's any economies of scale when we get to the public participation side, because I assume, they're going to advertise in the same locations and put out the same nets for the candidate themselves. But I was just thinking in terms of an entity that might have some familiarity with this region already, granted, totally different district, totally different demographics and whatnot. So I just did that come into play at all?
No, we did not discuss that specifically. And the people that we want the firm to reach out to, those are going to come from us. The group names, the names of the people, the names of the organizations, those are coming from us as board members. So it's not going to matter which firm it is, because if we tell them we want them to go to, these 10 service organizations, they're going to go to those 10 service organizations. Either firm would do that. We want them to go to, cafe. They're going to go to cafe or Chamber of Commerce or whatever. This group, we want, a group of parents, all grade sectors, elementary, middle, and high school. We want, a blend of people who are, college bound versus tech school bound. We can identify what we want, and that is not going to be driven by the firms themselves.
No, and that makes perfect sense. I just didn't know if there was any value in if they even used the same folks or had the same connections, if we sent them out and Rotary says, oh yeah, we've met with you guys before, or if they could offer suggestions when we direct them and say, hey, why don't you go out here based on their previous experiences, that, hey, this didn't really get much participation. Do you have some other areas you want us to go down? I don't know. I mean, it's not a question we could really fairly ask in the survey information, but I just didn't know if you got that sense at all, or if they volunteered anything like that.
No.
No.
So.
A part of it for me personally, speaking for my, decision, the community outreach is a pretty big piece of the whole process. And so for me, it weighed heavily on what was presented by them. And, you know, I think that was the difference for me that made it. Our scope of work was pretty detailed, and both companies answered, you know, adequately to our standards in their response to our RFP. But just, you know, that engagement of, you know, you helping out the board on selecting that, you know, the stakeholders, working with the community, bringing that language aspect, even though they both provided having that background of the community. The stakeholder was huge for me is a deciding factor. And I just felt that this company just elevated it just a little bit more.
You know, and that's also great information too. It's, I think, and I'm happy to support the committee's recommendation. So this is not fighting for any entity. I guess it surprises me a little bit when the stakeholder piece is such a huge part of this, and an entity that's previously done work in this area didn't rise maybe to the top. So that's where I just was, I guess, looking for information why that's maybe the case. I think I'm sure they'll both do a fine job, and I have no qualms over supporting the committee's recommendation. I just was curious because we have a group that has been here and presumably met with some of these stakeholder groups before, or at least representatives of their company. So my gut would have been that they would be a higher choice, but maybe on the flip side, maybe they didn't do a very good job. But it was just,
They both did a fine job. I'm not
Period.
saying that at all.
Well, and I think we need to remember that you mentioned it, Julie, Eastmont is completely different than Wenatchee's needs. Different demographics, different student, different needs. We're in a different track. So I'm not sure that's a benefit that they can provide because of the differences.
Can you hear me,
Oh.
Maria? Can I throw a couple of questions to you?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. To me, it seemed there were two priority areas, and listening to you both, I appreciate that. And from what I'd seen in the first round, I did also feel that we're both highly competent and that there might be small differences. The two areas, if there was a subtle difference, one would be in community engagement. And I think you've kind of answered that because they are specifically talking to Wenatchee. They both have two consultants who are inside the state and have done a lot of work inside the state. So they seem to have the same background. But the one question I was going to ask is, did you feel any one of them had a slight edge on the community engagement? And the other area would have been the ability to reach all candidates locally of all kinds. And there again, you would have a slightly different panorama, one firm that only works in the Pacific Northwest and one firm that actually has a fairly solid experience working with Pacific Northwest and Inland Northwest schools, but has more of a national outreach in experience. The technology that they would use, whether that would be different. But the primary thing I was interested in is if you felt there was any subtle difference in those two areas, community engagement, and the other is the ability to reach all kinds of candidates.
So they both discussed that, reaching all types of candidates. And they both mentioned, reaching out to the firms, to the professional organizations for Latino administrators, as well as African-American administrators, and then the traditional mainstream organizations like WASA and the National Association of School Administrators. It was interesting that McPherson, kind of quantified it. They felt like we were going to see 30-ish applications. Both recognize that the vacancy rate of superintendent positions is a little bit greater right now. There's been some hesitancy on the part of some superintendent applicants to, want to jump from one district to another because of COVID and the political climate and so on. They talked about how, stable board dynamics was pretty critical in the number of applicants that would be attracted to a district. They thought that we would have, 30-ish applications, 8 to 10 being highly competent, and their focus is having the appropriate blend of qualifications and fit for the district and the community. So I thought it was really telling. I think that was maybe what tipped it over the edge for me, talking about making sure that the candidate fit the community.
And to add to that, I'm looking at my notes from both companies. To answer your question specifically, Martin, Northwest Leadership, they tend to focus solely in the state of Washington for their recruitments. McPherson and Jacobson, they stated multiple times 125 consultants across the nation. So if we're talking, nationwide recruitment and local recruitment, for me, that stood out. It wasn't the deciding factor, but that definitely stood out. It's not just local Washington state recruitment, but also across the nation, as opposed to Northwest Leadership. They tend to focus specifically in the state.
Although they did recently recruit a superintendent from Dubai.
From Dubai, yes. And I think they did mention another one from Colombia. And they specifically said that's more of word of mouth, like, hey, I have this person. Do you know anybody? And so, yeah, they did specifically talk about across the river and somebody else from Colombia.
So one other thing that was a talking point in our debrief was that the Northwest Leadership Group talked about email lists for colleges, universities, and we just had that as a teeny red flag, like, whoa, wait, no newbies here, please. Thank you very much. Not that they would focus on that, but the fact that they, we were looking at minute little things. So honestly, it's not a big reflection on the quality of their work, but.
I know
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for the extra information. And I guess the other comment I would make is that we had 3 pretty good people on the interview committee. So that's a big factor as well.
Thanks.
But touching on
Our
that,
side.
was Superintendent Price in agreement with your choice as
Yeah,
well?
of
Was
course.
unanimous? And then I know that we'll get into this detail further on down the road, but how are those groups chosen? How are the groups that will be the community representatives and the people who the companies will meet with in the community? How are those groups chosen?
Start writing your list.
We just write a list and, okay. And it's open-ended. We can have as many community members meet with them as, or how, I assume there's probably dates. I know dates that they're going to be in person, but.
Probably not. We're going to have to prioritize as a board and consolidate groups to interview,
Yeah.
but they're opening to receiving all suggestions.
So one of
I
the
might add a little. Can
Go
I
ahead,
add a
Mark.
little bit to that planning ahead? Yes, because ultimately the board is going to be, at the whole board is going to be who decides how many we can fit into the number of days we have, but all suggestions can be made. I think the consultant will give advice on how to do that as well. Our own administration's community relations will have input, but that is a job that we will be doing probably about the last week in October, and you will all be involved in it to some extent. But we will put together the strongest package we can.
One of the first steps that both companies mentioned was the first step is meeting with each individual board member. And, to hear what we would like to see, the direction we would like to see this going. So
I think that would guide the recommendations of, like Martin mentioned, of the direction they would like for us, they recommend for us to move forward.
And we do know who was invited 4 years ago. We took a look at that list, and obviously we're not going to use that, but that'll be another set of input so that we work together and come up with the strongest possible community engagement that we can.
I have one further. Laura, you mentioned something that I think what you mentioned is very critical and seemed to be critical to this company, and that's stable board dynamics. As we all know, we're moving into a situation where there's a possibility of not having a single member of the board on the board when we hire a new superintendent. I think that's
When the
So-
superintendent is hired.
hired.
Yeah, so the decision would be made in April, which
May.
will still have the current board.
Right, but at May, it is filing for everyone, all
Right, so the
5
transition
positions.
wouldn't happen until December, January.
But it's a factor, I think,
Yeah, it is.
in the superintendent.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
That is a possibility for a superintendent. And in that vein, this is on a different subject, but something that I brought up to our superintendent. I'm not sure exactly how this process works, but I would have asked, and it needs board approval, I understand, or at least discussion with the board. I am interested, again, Julie and I were elected into a 4-year position, and I'm interested in finding out from our other law firm that we have in Seattle, the Pacifica Law Firm. Am I getting that right, Kim? I'm interested in having their perspective on us remaining in our position for the 4-year terms that we were elected for. I know that we've heard from Danielle, and she's given us her perspective on that, but I am interested in pursuing our other law firm that's on retainer to look at that for us.
Okay, so I think that is a separate conversation right now. We're discussing the search firm for the superintendent.
Right, but I don't know when that, I kind of felt that discussion was coming to an end, and it was brought to my attention through the stable board dynamics that's something that I need to bring up. There wasn't the spot for that or a moment on the agenda. So that's why I brought it up.
Maybe we could complete this conversation, and then under board communication, we could spend a moment or two in discussion.
So do we have any further questions in regards to the search firm recommended? Great, so is there a motion to approve McPherson and Jacobson's as the firm to conduct the search for the superintendent?
Move to approve the selection of the search firm as presented.
Thank you, Julie.
I will second that motion.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Any discussion or any further discussion? Martin?
No, not at this point.
Perfect. At this time, I will call for.
Oh, you know what? Let me correct myself, Maria. Sorry. I do want to clarify that the next stage after this will be to actually negotiate a contract, which we will have a 2-person committee working with legal counsel to do that. Our legal counsel has already got a template. We know how it was done in the past, and we will try to get that done as rapidly as possible so we can move into the work. And I did mention beforehand that I would appoint a 2-person negotiating committee of Maria as chair and Julie as the second person on that committee to work with our legal counsel if we approve this motion and select the firm. So the motion should be, that is information. I think the motion is, it is, as president, I'm informing you that that next step, which is done, was done in the past by the president solo, will be done by a 2-person committee.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, so now I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Oh, sorry, Martin. Great, thank you. Motion carries. Perfect. Now, next on the agenda is the superintendent report. Bill?
Great, thank you. So I've got a few items to share with you all this evening. First of all, October is National Principals Month, and this month we celebrate our principals for their leadership and their commitment to the success of our students. And I recognize that over the years, the role of the principal has greatly expanded and school leadership has become an increasingly demanding task. So on behalf of myself and the cabinet, we want to say a big thank you to all our principals and assistant principals for the work that they do.
Here, here.
Hear, hear. A couple of quick reminders for the board as well. So November 21st, during our board workshop, a contractor from the Washington State School Directors Association will engage the board in a self-assessment. That is Cynthia McMullen. Will be here. And in order to allow adequate time to complete that process, which takes about 2.5 hours, the workshop will be longer that day than normal. So because this is longer than traditional, I wanted to give you all an early heads up. The time frame for our November 21st workshop will be 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. I also wanted to bring up again this idea about a bond and levy timeline. So our current education programs and operations levy expires in 2025. And the levy is primarily for costs related to supporting core learning activities, technology, safety, increases our ability to offer elective and specialist classes, certain field trips and extracurricular programs, music, drama, art, sports, those kinds of things. So I think it's important we start thinking about that early with that in mind, and knowing that we also need to update and maintain some of our current facilities. I think the district should be looking at the timing of a potential bond as well. So Sean Fitzgerald, our CFO, and I met yesterday with a representative from Piper Sandler to discuss a potential timeline for future bond work. And sometime in the near future, we hope to share some recommendations with the board on timelines for bond and levy work, because those things are going to come up on us quickly. And last for me tonight is just a reminder, the board is welcome to join our staff during our October 14th professional development sessions. We have several trainings going on for staff that day. I'm going to make my personal recommendation that you check out the math session with Dr. Jennifer Bay Williams. I'll be there to get my book signed. That is at the Wenatchee Convention Center, the Orchard Exhibit Hall. The elementary session will be 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and there will be a secondary session with Jennifer Bay Williams as well from 12:30 to 4 p.m. And that is my report for this evening.
Thank you, Bill. And now for board communication. Julie?
I don't have much except that I attended or participated in the General Assembly, which went very long. We got through about half of the agenda on Friday, and so it was punted to Saturday. So I did what I could to vote our positions. I will also be emailing them in just in case we missed anything. Fortunately, most of our stuff was on the consent agenda, so it was pretty easy, but it was a lot of discussion between topics. Some districts argue about some really funny things, but anyway, so that's what I spent some time doing, trucking around with the high school soccer team now, visiting all the facilities in our district. Makes me really want that bond. So that's it for now.
Martin?
Yes, I do actually. And you can tell I'm not in the room and not with you. But one thing I wanted to say, I wanted to thank Soraya and Courtney for their excellent presentations, and say that I'm not sure, I can see one head, I don't know whether anybody's in the room still. Look forward to being able to join the superintendents of student advisory councils for both high schools. And thank you very much for coming for the first time this year. You're very welcome. And then also being out of the room, I want to thank all 4 board members for their diligent and highly supportive work while I've been away. And I see it in the way that you engaged, and then Julie doing the work right now with the assembly. Laura, you backed up on the search committees. But all of you, I really want to appreciate that as a cohesive, highly supportive board that I really welcome and thank you for. And in particular, I want to thank Vice President Maria Iñiguez for chairing tonight's meeting and chairing the search committees that we're working on. But basically, all of you are working together, and I'm not with you, but I thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, Martin. Laura?
I'm good.
Catherine?
I have had the privilege of doing a few things in the last couple of weeks. The first being the PAC meeting that Maria and Bill and I were at, seeing Mr. Lopez shine in his new position, and the two teachers that came and spoke. And, I understand a little bit of Spanish, but boy, Mr. Zavala, engaging and fascinating and thrilling teacher to hear, even in the language that's not my first language. I mean, wow, what a teacher. They were both wonderful, and it was a great event. As Mr. Lopez said, they provided 200 meals, and they were gone in a hurry. So he's put the challenge out that there will be 400 people attending that next time. So we'll see how that goes. But that was fun and exciting. And then the next night I didn't know much about AVID, any part of the AVID program. So I went to the Foothills Middle School and got to hear the AVID presentation from the 8th graders there. It was a really neat way that they did it. They had us go from classroom to classroom, and each classroom had 3 or more AVID students that described why they were in AVID, what it did for them, and how it helped them, and their goals from being in AVID. So that was really great. I thank Mr. Govea and the group there for that. And then today I got to meet up with our new principal at Pioneer. Wow, she is spectacular, and her life story is spectacular, and she is a really going to be, and already is, a fantastic asset for this district. So that was great to meet with her. And then I'm going to meet Thursday and Friday with the other new principals that are in the district at Sunny Slope and Lewis and Clark. So that will be my board update. I think that's it.
I want to blurt in again. Catherine, you spoke after me and giving great examples of exactly the kind of diligent and supportive work that I thank all the board for. You went to PAC, you went to AVID, you're welcoming new principals. That's kind of work that I think we all can do and respect each other doing. Thank you very much for that.
I do want to touch back on the issue that you brought up earlier about having another attorney look at, was it a resolution that we passed?
I'm not sure.
We passed a resolution for our district, saying that we were going to move forward with districting, and that we would have an election in November, and that we would have all 5 seats. And we seem to have examined, the issue in a multitude of ways, with, various questions brought forward, research done, answers returned. So I just would like to know, why do you think having another attorney, come in? I mean, it will cost us money to do that. And what benefit, or what is it that's telling you that we're going to get some different answer by doing that?
Because when I met with Superintendent Gordon and our attorney, I'm sorry, I can't recall her last name, Danielle, but we spoke at length. We had a meeting about this and discussed the RCW or whatever, the resolution, but there's some kind of legal.
The Washington State Voters Act?
Well, no, it's not that. There's kind of what leads us to having to put forward the resolution. There's some interpretation there that I think can be interpreted differently. And so I am interested. I think that Danielle feels very strongly about us moving to the redistricting. And I think Julie and I, as we voted for the resolution in good faith, we're fine with that as well. But I think that I think it's important to consider that we were elected for 4-year terms by the people. The people spoke, elected us to a 4-year position, and that's something that I think that it's not clear that we could not, with a vote of the board, keep our 4-year terms. It's not, Danielle was not able to say with absolute certainty, clarity, here it is in the law, there's no way to change this. And there's been discussion. I've had discussions with different people, and there seems to be an opportunity to as a board vote that we are able to keep our 4-year terms, continue our 4-year terms. And so I'm interested in seeing if that, I know that the reason that we voted to redistrict was because our lawyer recommended that we do that. And a lot of it was because there's the potential for a violation. That was what was said again and again. There's a potential for a lawsuit. There's a potential for a violation of the Voters' Rights Act. But that hasn't, we haven't violated the Voters' Rights Act. We're just moving in the direction of making sure that won't happen. But I think there is leeway there for the board to explore the two of us keeping our fulfilling our 4-year terms.
I'd have to read the
Uh,
link in the resolution again, but I believe that we did determine that we are potentially operating in violation of the Voters' Rights Act. Right, Voters' Rights Act, is that the right term? Yeah.
There was potential for a violation. We're not, that's not, in my meeting with Daniel, I felt that there is the potential for a violation, but we're not violating the Voters' Rights Act.
That isn't my understanding.
Well,
No, it's
but I feel like
it's
I
not
need a
my
little more
understanding
clarity.
either. I believe we put in motion a process which is past the point of no return in terms of that resolution. I also believe that Danielle did 2 outreaches to get independent legal opinions after the questions that Catherine has raised were brought up, and they both came back negative. So I am individually
made aware of that.
very confident that we've got that information covered. And maybe we should refresh the information that's been brought to the board already.
Well, I have not heard, I did not hear from Danielle that there were 2 sources that she went to in addition to, I did not hear that in the meeting that I had with her and with Superintendent Gordon.
Yeah, and I just took a minute to kind of look at the resolution that we've adopted. And my understanding still of the process is we do still have to implement this plan by adopting it finally before November of this year. It does say in the resolution that that we would all be up for election. That's, I think, the default understanding in the statute. I was not made aware that Danielle had reached out to multiple firms. My understanding had been that she had only investigated in her own firm. I think we're still at a point where if there's an ability to do it, we could amend this resolution before we have to finally approve it. I don't think there's clarity on whether there was additional opinions provided. I don't know that it changes anything. I think some of us feel like maybe we owe it to constituents to at least vet that a little bit further because of this uncertainty. I think there is still time, granted the resolution does say what it says. I don't think it changes the districting plan or the finding that we proposed that it may be in violation. I don't think it changes the fact of redistricting. I think the isolated question is the 5 members being up in 2023 actually, is that really the case? Do we have, enough confirmation that yes, we've explored this to the end, and there's nothing we can do about it. I'm not convinced that necessarily happened. you know, I've heard from people as well. This is no, you know, there's ways around it. You can, I don't know. That's not my area. So, and that's why I do lean on our legal advisors to tell us that. And I know we've heard one opinion. I wasn't aware that that was ever vetted with anyone else, nor would it necessarily need to be unless we specifically said, hey, get this, you know, can you please confirm this? I think we've got a board member who has a justified interest in, you know, making sure that after all the hard work and effort they put into a 4-year term, that yes, this is the way it is. I don't see much harm in having, and myself too. I mean, I'm interested in that as well, but I don't want personal self-interest to, you know, ever dictate anything. I think there's a question out there that I don't know that we're solidly convinced we have the definitive answer to, and I don't see significant harm in just vetting that before we take this final action. And if a minor amendment needs to be made to the resolution, we have the time to do that.
So just a couple things. This actually was brought up to the board in April or March of 2020. So this is not something that we just, and the reason it came up to the board and Superintendent Gordon was because there was evidence of a possible complaint of violation of the Washington State Voters Act. That's how this all came about and was initiated. The discussion was initiated. So secondly, I'm not sure, you know, I keep hearing, well, this is one attorney's opinion. I think this is her area of expertise. She's presented all the information. When it was challenged, when we had our public hearing, she reached out to other firms to confirm the information she was presenting. And she provided the attorneys she talked to, and it was same result that she was presenting to us. And I think we need to remember the why we are moving forward, the potential of a violation, the evidence that has been there. Are we doing this for the betterment of our community to imply that we are in line with the act, or are we doing it because we don't want to campaign again to retain our seats? Is it about a greater purpose, or is it about us personally? Again, the evidence that she presented at before that day of our public hearing, she went through some examples of why the potential of violating the act, the direction it was going, and why this is necessary for our school district. I could spend a couple hours talking to you on it, since we're taking this, on a personal perspective, the reason why we need to move in this direction and how the red flags are there of that violation. I'm sorry, it's not public comment time. Thank you. So again, I think we need to remember about the why as the whole system, what has transgressed that has brought us to the resolution. And I believe we're very close to a due date in November for the next step. Okay.
And I believe what Danielle's comment was in terms of, her comment was that if we did not put all things up at the next election, we would be in violation of the statute. So that statute is probably, reference, and I would have to look at it and I would remember up here, but that's, I remember her clearly saying, if you don't put all things up for election, we'll be in violation of the statute.
Well,
Okay. Give me a second. I'm going to repeat, Martin, I'm going to repeat what Kim just said, just so that you have that information as well. And the
Thank you.
public hearing. The reason she recalls Danielle saying that if not all seats were up for re-election, it would be a violation of the statute. Go ahead, Laura.
That's consistent with my memory that Danielle also reached out to the state to confirm that, as well as consulting. And I'm not sure to what extent she consulted other legal firms, but she did go back for a second explanation. That's what I remember. And that's why I suggested that perhaps the best starting point would be to collect that information, which is the current stage of what Danielle reported to us. I'm certainly working from memory, cannot necessarily be authoritative, and let all the board members see that. And that may, in fact, explain that. As far as the other aspect of the reason for redistricting, I feel very, very strongly that that is something that we should be doing. It was considered over a lengthy period of time. And I think that is a timing decision that is correct and should not be changed.
And for the record, I don't think she's suggesting, or even I'm suggesting undoing the districting or anything. It was just that isolated question of whether, I think approval of the plan is set in motion going. I don't think there's any dispute in that at all. I think it's just that element of, is there an interpretation in that statute where all five, once we've districted, all five don't have to go up on that 2023 timeframe. There seems to be some rumblings out there that, and I do recall Danielle, looking into the issue, at least herself. I don't know what resources she also used to back check and double check it. It's not necessarily uncommon to get a second opinion if you think there might be a different interpretation of a statute. That's what I understand. Maybe she's asking for is just to make sure that, yes, Danielle's interpretation of the statute is accurate in terms of just the five having to all be up. I don't think anyone's touching the redistricting or keeping it on the path or anything like that at all.
Okay. So I do understand that the concern about, needing to run again for your position. And this conversation has been around longer than 2 years, because I can remember having been newly elected in my last term, wondering if and taught, what the timeline was and if that was going to apply to me or not. And so it is a little bit disheartening to think, after all the work and effort that you have gone through, that you might have to do it again. So I get that. The question has been raised, and what I heard Martin suggest is that we would possibly do a refresh on the information that we have already received so that everybody can, we're going from memory. My memory is not completely sharp on the issue. So I don't think it's a bad thing that we would all get a summary of what we have already received so that we can confirm whether or not another firm was consulted, and if more than one firm was consulted. I do know that we have talked as a board, maybe not with this group, but the board prior, about could we do, rolling elections, and research has been done on that multiple times, and the answer had come back no multiple times. So am I opposed to being refreshed on the information that we've already received? No. Do I want to employ another firm to look at the same question we've already looked at if we've had it reviewed by other firms already? No. If it hasn't been reviewed, then maybe so.
I think that, it comes down to, we're saying this is Danielle's interpretation. I do not know of any other firm that was consulted. And I think that her consultation of random firms that we're not aware of or don't know anything about is something that needs to be, yeah, we do need that information and be refreshed by that information. Again, I think it is important to point out that we're not in violation. If we were in violation of the Voter Rights Act, then we would be in trouble. There would be something moving forward. It was always presented as a potential violation. So I think that's a factor. It would be different if a lawsuit was pending, if the ACLU, as Danielle had stated, had somebody here and they were looking to say, okay, we got you guys, like they did in Yakima, but that was not the case, which is why we, as I said, in good faith, I have voted for the redistricting. I am for the redistricting. We're moving forward with that. And Julie and I voted for that in good faith for those reasons. I'm not opposed to it. I just want further confirmation, or I'm asking for another legal interpretation.
I think Laura put it very well, that, and I would add that if you, to review the information we've got, we all learn from it. And then I think if you go out for a second legal opinion, you do it after talking to your own internal counsel, and you do it in conjunction with that person who's your primary legal counsel, knowing what's going on. And I do want to say something else, and that is one of the items that the board received a lot of education on was the difference in expense between waiting to be Yakima and being proactive and doing what we're doing. And
So-
that's our fiduciary responsibility with the public purse.
Are we okay with the recommendation of Martin for the next steps and Laura of? getting
That does not preclude a second legal opinion. It means that we do it with more information. Or
Correct.
if we do it with more information.
Correct.
I agree with that.
So my understanding means that we'll get the information that we've been presented together and maybe some additional clarity on what sources were used to vet the interpretation of the statute regarding that we all 5 have to go up for reelection once the redistricting happens. If it appears that we're not satisfied that multiple or enough sources have been consulted, then we can decide whether an additional interpretation is authorized or warranted.
Kim, remind me of that.
That's what I would understand.
Me too.
Remind me of that timeline of the board approved when it would be intent to have that I'm sorry, the next step for the board approval. Court approval. Okay. So is there not a November date we as a board need to? Okay, but that's not,
If I recall, I need to pull out the timeline, but I want to say it was November 15th, we have to take an action. So
right. That's what
I think we've got at least
okay. So we have time.
a special meeting, a couple regular meetings, at least if we need to consult further.
We have time, but we don't. I mean, we need to, if we're going to get our refresh, that has
Right.
to be happening at the next meeting.
Okay.
Or send the materials out in advance so we can discuss at the next meeting and.
So Kim will coordinate. Martin, you'll be back in town.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think, I would agree with that, but I also think that as we get that information, we'll be able to see what potential other steps could be and plan them. And it sounds from here as if there is time to be open-minded about a different interpretation before a deadline.
Thank you.
So the first thing, though, is to ask Danielle to refresh that information and clarify it, and then we pick it up from there. We'll learn something from that step for the subsequent step.
And who's going to do that, if I might ask?
Kim. Kim's volunteering.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Good. Okay, awesome. I will give a quick update. So just kind of want to say a huge thank you to the staff that have been working on the relocation of sports and activities from outdoor to indoor. I know that's been a huge load. And I've heard from few parents how proactive the district has been in moving outdoor practices indoors and accommodating students, as well as the students that don't attend Wenatchee schools but participate in our activities and sports. So kudos to that. Another kudos to Mr. Lopez for the work that he's doing on the radio station. I got to be on last Wednesday, bright and early. What a great outreach. I was able to talk a little bit about redistricting as well as the search for the superintendent. So thank you to Mr. Lopez of all the work he's doing in the community to engage our community, our Latino community and others. The show is actually somewhat bilingual, so which was really, really neat. Getting all the information out to the community about what's happening in our schools. And I think that's it for me. If we have no more board communication, then we are adjourned.